Welcome, I'm Henning and I'm taking you on a journey of guitar tone. Now, we live in the golden age of guitar tone. If you cannot get a good guitar sound nowadays, super easy without a lot of hassle, then, well, we're going to get to point number one in a bit, then you don't know what good guitar tone is, because it is extremely simple nowadays. And we're going to look at miking a cab very traditionally. We're going to look at modelers. We're going to look at software. We're going to look at load boxes and all that stuff. It is not magic. It is not complicated. You do not need courses. You probably do not need this video. So we're not going to exclude anything. There are people who are watching certain videos, not mine, luckily, and they're saying, well, you didn't mic a cab. I don't actually know what it sounds like. Stop using the simulations. I've been doing this for 10 years. These simulations, whether it's dynamic IRs from 2 notes or IRs or whatever, I have done these things where I mic'd the cab and did the 2 notes output from an amp, compared it. I couldn't tell the difference in my setup. There is absolutely no way that it makes any difference anywhere. These simulations have come a long way and they're ridiculously good. If you're going with digital simulations, analog cab sim is still analog cab sim. But we're going to look at everything and we're going to go through a couple of points. Big thanks to my sponsor, Forward Audio from Germany, who make some pretty awesome mix-ready IR, so you don't have to go pick the mic and the position and then know about the stuff, even though you're learning it here. You can just pick one, and you know what? As I find out later, they're actually pretty damn good. And I'm not saying that because they're sponsoring this video. So check out Forward Audio in the description below. That stuff isn't expensive. Even if you buy some IRs, you're like, oh, I've got better ones. I don't know, you wasted $8.99 or something. So we're going to go straight to point number one. And that is, know what a good guitar tone is. And it's not obvious. It really isn't. I get so many comments. I got this piece of gear and it sounds just like an amp. No, it doesn't. Or I got this piece of gear and it's brilliant. No, it isn't. Why do I know that? Because I know you guys. And I also have been you guys. When I did the albums that I did, loads of them, I don't know, 15, 20 albums with some pretty big people on them, I used a Pod 2. And I thought that's a good guitar sound. I thought that's what guitar sound is. Boy, was I wrong. The music still is fun. The music still is good. The guitar sounds could have been so much better. Now, you are blinded sometimes by, I'm playing this piece of gear and you are in it, that's what you're hearing, and you don't know that there's better stuff, or there's too much low end, not enough mids. Knowing what a good guitar tone is the trick. Getting it is so easy. And how do you know? I mean, listen to Randy Rhoads. There's nothing in the bass. It's a very thin mid. I mean, it's not a great guitar tone, but it created great music. There are a lot of great guitar tones out there in shitty music, and there are a lot of really shitty guitar tones out there in great music. Combining the two is the trick. Now, a cab, which is primarily what we're talking about, recording what you're doing, is primarily responsible not for your tone, not for your sound, as some of my friends are saying, but for frequency response. How much low end, how much mids, how much fizzly top end is there. And you can easily adjust that top end with mic position, with mic choice, and so on, as we're going to go into. Guitar sound, that's different. It is, of course, related to frequency response, but guitar sound can be how much gain is there, how dense it is, how dynamic is it, how are the transients, how long is your sustain, which is actually more guitar tone. So a sound, for me, is different than tone. Tone is in the guitar and the fingers. But that kind of needs to go and be translated by what makes the sound, which is amp and cab. But frequency response, I mean, fiddle around on your amp all you want, put a different cab on it, it changes drastically. Okay? It changes drastically by moving the mic on the same cab. So the point is, we're talking primarily about frequency response. And that is where a lot of mistakes happen. That's where a lot of mistakes happen in modelers. That's why they sound sometimes shit. That's where a lot of mistakes happen in software. And that's where mistakes can happen when you are actually miking. And we are going to try to give you a couple of pointers to avoid these mistakes. So the first step is knowing what you want, where you're going. What is actually a good guitar sound? We're going to get to that in point 2. And here we are, guitar sound brilliance. Tip number 2, have a balanced cab. Obviously, this is all highly dependent on what you want to do and where you want to go and what style of music you're doing. But generally speaking, have a balanced cab. Meaning, if you have a cab that when you're palm muting goes woof, woof, has all that low end, that's useless in any mix. In any mix, any mix engineer worth their salt is going to roll off that low end up to 100 hertz, but then you still have all that energy pumping out into the mics. It's not a good idea. You want some mids. Guitars all in the mids, having like this mid-cut, mid-staffed thing I know you might like for the metal, but realistically, it's not a good idea. And having all that super mega fizzly top end up here is also not the greatest. Having balance. Having all of it, but not too much. I have some cabs from renowned brands that I can do whatever I want to, and they're just not gonna be good. Now, people talk about, everyone's sounding like a V30, like my friend Glenn. And using the V30 is going to result in everyone sounding the same. That is the biggest crap I've ever heard in my life, because that V30, even if it's exactly the same speaker in different pieces of wood, in different cabs, is going to sound pretty drastically different, with different mic and mic positions, drastically different player, different amp, different. It is not going to sound the same. Now, when we talk about you following your dreams and your favorite artists, do not do that. Do not say, I love Tool. What cab is he playing? You don't know what they used in the studio. Or he's playing a modeler now. Maybe not in the studio. Maybe your favorite album was recorded with something that was sitting around in a studio, and it was completely different than what you think he's playing because he has an endorsement. In this case, Tietzel. But he might have used something else. Probably not. But any artist, it applies to any artist. John Mayer, what is he using? Well, you don't know what he recorded with. You have no idea. And also, if you have exactly that same setup, you don't have that mix engineer. You don't have those preamps, mics, that guitar, those fingers, and the musical ability. You have a different musical ability. So don't go there. Don't chase your signature dreams of that's what they play, so therefore I go get this. Don't even get what I like. Find something that's balanced, that fits your style. Not too much low end, decent mids, not too much high end. Find that cab, and here's the trick. Do not change it. Find that cab also applies to an IR. Whether you find the actual cab or you have some kind of DI solution with your amp or software, cab can also mean that IR. But in general, my tip is stick with it. Because in a mix context, you are mixing, let's say, your own stuff. And then you're changing cab and cab and cab and cab. It is so drastically going to affect the way the song sounds that your songs from one to the other aren't going to blend together. It'll sound too different. Even within a song, I'm saying stick with the same cab. There are some cabs that are beautiful for cleans. They almost sound hi-fi and have that much top end. Yeah. If you want something like this super drastic, go for it. I found sticking with one thing that's globally usable is a better bet for me because I know in the mix exactly where that's sitting. I know how to handle it. And if you look at Tim Pierce, the master, who's literally recorded any style for anyone, from the heaviest to the jazziest and bluesiest, he has usually one cab that he goes to, but he's got very limited amount of cabs in the basement. And I had cabs in the basement as well, in boxes with mics on them. Haven't used them in years because honestly, the digital stuff covers it. But stick with a cab. And that especially applies to live. If you're using a modeler live, if you're playing quad, Cortex, Helix, whatever, do not skip around between presets because the mix engineer found the balance. You gave him something and he's like, okay, that's cool. Not too woofy, not too bitey. And then you go into the next preset, all of a sudden the mix come out, the bass drops out. What is he going to do? In a live context, make your presets preferably, I'm just throwing out ideas here, with the same cab. Because that is going to determine the frequency response big time. Way more than you changing amps and effects and whatever. So don't make it too hard for the mix engineer. Stick with the same cab. And if possible, have it be that cab that you used on the recording as well. Find the one that works for you in your modeler, in real life, with IRs, preferably from Forward Audio. They're good. And then, I'm technically selling one of theirs right now because get one and then, find the right one and then stick with it. It is going to make your life, your recording, and everything so much easier. Quick add-on on cabs. Now, you're going to ask, do I need a 112? Do I need a 212? Do I need a 412? Is the 412 the metal thing? You're going to argue with me and you're not going to agree, but that's fine. I don't have I think I have a 412, a Revv. Never used it. It's a great cab, but it's inconvenient and it's loud and big. I know it's rock and roll. I get that. 2007, I did a prog metal album. I'm going to play you a couple of examples of that. In 2007, I never thought of or heard of, maybe it wasn't even around, load boxes and digital cab modeling and IRs. I think that stuff came later. Maybe, what do I know? So I recorded that whole album with a single 112 cab. It's not even a cab. It's a Fender Hot Rod for $6.99, where I took the amp out. So it's the Fender Hot Rod cab. It's not V30. It's whatever Fender put in there. And I put one of those in front of it. Not the 906, the 609. $100, Sennheiser mic in front of a 112 from Fender. Whole album, everything I recorded was that cab. Here are some examples, and then you make up your mind whether that doesn't work or not or whatever. Or if I know at all what I'm talking about. I don't know. Maybe I don't. Tip number 3, mic selection. It's actually not that difficult. There's this mystic law, you got to use the SM57 and the 161 ribbon from Royer, or you got to use the SM57 and the, $2,500 Neumann U60, 67, 87, whatever. I think it's all bullshit. There's the, Fretman technique with 257. We'll get to positioning in a bit. Essentially what you want to do you want to have something bitey and something that cuts through the mix. And you want to have something that is warmer and rounder and thicker so that you ideally, if you're using two microphones, can mix them together and have the best of both worlds. That can be achieved to a degree with positioning, darker or bitier, top-endy, or with different microphones. And then if that microphone has the tendency to be warmer anyway, moving it in a position on the cab where it will sound warmer or rounder or thicker enhances that attribute. If you only use one mic, Lewitt MTP 440. Relatively inexpensive. It's a thicker, fuller version of a 57. If you have a 57, use a 57. Honestly, and I'm going to get a lot of shit for this, use a 58. The only difference between the 57 and the 58 is the grill. So technically you could take, this is a 30-year-old 58. Technically you could take the grill off of the 58. Oh. And then you kind of have a 57-ish kind of a thing. Oh, this is completely falling apart inside. This I had since I made music, 35 years. Holy crap. So that's really the big difference. It'll all do the job. Do you have to have a super expensive mic? I don't think so. What I've been using lately, this contraption, and we're going to talk about mic stands in a bit, with a 57, and something completely nobody's ever talked about because I had it and I tried it, a Sennheiser MK4. But with higher sound pressure levels, with louder speakers, I found that it was distorting. So I went with an MK8, which has a pad. It also has different patterns, but realistically using cardioid and then just using the pad because it was distorting. That's really the big difference. Why I also use the MK8, but you want either a dynamic mic for the bite in the middle and then something rounder and maybe a little bit more, I would say, dynamic, top-endy. So you could use a 57 and this very inexpensive Lewitt LCT 240 Pro, $150, nice condenser mic. It doesn't have a pad, so be careful and check if it can handle high sound pressure levels, because if you're cranking your cab, your condenser needs to be able to handle it, which means if it doesn't have a pad, it might not. Now, again, MTP 440, any kind of dynamic in the more centered position is fine. I also have this R10 here, which is a ribbon mic, and ribbon mics are usually the rounder ones that you use for guitar. That's a very nice mic, but I had trouble with some clipping on it, so I got to play around with it a bit more. But that's going into the whole mystical, or you need a ribbon mic because it's going to give you the sound. I call bullshit on that. And this thing clocks in at, I don't know, $800-900. So that's getting that just to track the guitar. I don't know. Now, a staple in the industry, of course, is Sennheiser 421. I've never used it. I know it's got more top end. It's a condenser, but mixed with a 57 could be good. That's a standard. Honestly, if you use one mic, 57, or Sennheiser 906, because positioning is very convenient, but also there's the 609, which doesn't have the 3 different EQs on it. So I've used the 609 for years as my only mic, and I got good results. So that's something I would go for. But something interesting now is on the market. Austrian Audio has this, which is the OD5, and that's a dynamic mic. But it also has a pad and a high-pass filter. And also, look at the positioning. So when your mic stand is getting you close to where you want to be, you can actually take the whole capsule and swivel it. That is very, very cool and convenient to get the perfect sound. Now, this is a dynamic mic, but why does it have these clickies? It's actually an active dynamic mic, meaning it doesn't need phantom power, and it can handle longer cable runs. It doesn't need that drastic boost from a mic preamp that usually dynamic mics need. So it is dynamic, but it actively transmits the signal. So this is very cool, and I want to really do a test run with it when we're positioning mics along its sister, the OC7, which is really the same idea. But that's a condenser. So you have the dynamic and the condenser from the same company with the same ideas, but you can literally get in the sweet spots and then mix and match. So what we're going to do when we talk about mic positioning, we're going to do my setup with an MK8 from Sennheiser, and let's go with the good old Shure SM57. Now, of course, we're going to do each one separately as well. And then these two, and see how these mics that kind of, were developed together can pair on a guitar cab and what you can get from it. You don't have to spend a lot of money. If you can, get something dynamic for bite, get something else to go further outside of the speaker for warmth and roundness and fatness so that you can mix it in later. Now we're going to get to a topic that you don't want to talk about. Mic stands. You probably use whatever the crap is around. And trust me, having a mic stand that works with you, having a mic stand that is easily adjustable and gets, that's the kicker here, to the spot where you want to be is essential. Now, if you have a big 412, you can use a higher mic stand. But I mean, if you have a 112 or whatever, you want to get to the right point. Now, I would be advocating for this behemoth. And you can see I can actually put two different mics on the same stand. This tri-orbit thing sadly has been broken for years and doesn't really 100% position anymore and tighten. Been trying to get a replacement. And this is great, but this is a small tri-orbit stand. Then we've got the O2X, that's what it's called, and an OA on it. So realistically, you're looking at, I don't know, $600-700 here, which is ridiculous. However, that allows me to have a single, very small stand and position it right here next to the cab and really have the absolute perfect position for each mic, perfect angle, and all that, which is what I'll be using for this video. But you're very likely not going to buy that unless you're super serious about your cab miking. So what do you use? Something like, this is a Hercules. Hercules. It easily hides in there. It easily adjusts. These are under $100. And it really tightens. You don't want one of those. You don't want one of those where, you tighten your ass off and then the thing slowly sinks while you're recording. You need a decent mic stand. Now let's see if we could use this. The nice thing is this has a quick change head. So if you have this on several mics, bam. So right now the swivel I can do is whatever the SM57 allows right here, right? So I can go rather low on this. And I can't really go, I can go just as low as I would want. This would be the middle here of the cab. And I couldn't go middle unless I'm pointing down and then I'm on an axis. So with this stand, it's not the greatest for miking a 112. Of course, if I have a 412 or something, I'd be up here somewhere and then I could probably find the right angle relatively easily. But it is already a better stand and I highly recommend looking into something like this, especially being able to have the quick change is a good thing. Gravity makes this. Heavy plate, green rubber at the bottom. And I like the people from Gravity. They're very nice people. So we're going to adjust that. that plate's not going to be in the way. That's a little bit swivelly. Oh, okay, you tighten it and it stops being swivelly. Let's see. So you can adjust the height a bit. I haven't worked with this. Really tighten. And you have a boom. Not the longest boom in the world, but that's okay. Oh, haha! Smaller boom. That's actually... You might want to look into this model, which is the gravity model. Gravity thing with bass. I don't know. So let's see if we can position the 57 with this. We can definitely turn around, get it close, elongate the bottom, and I got it smack in the position where I want it. Now, of course, I would need a second one for the second mic, and that would really be the case for any mic stand you're using other than the Triad Orbit with the O2X, which is going to clock in at a lot of money. But if you're using one mic and you want the ultimate, I'm going to be honest, the Triad Orbit is the shit. You also get it with a boom, and then you use these Triad Orbit hex pieces, which will just rest on your mics. And look at this. Click it in. Here's the whole stand with the boom on it. And adjusting this is a very different experience. Bam, done. Or let's do it from the side. And that's it. And it's pretty damn solid. But with Triad Orbit comes no money on your account. Look into a mic stand that is heavy enough and can get you so that it stays where it's supposed to be and can get you in the right position. There are some small cheap ones, yes, but do not skimp out on the mic stand. You're gonna thank me later.
It's all done, you'll thank me later.
So let's talk about the magical thing, the thing that you can buy whole courses on, mic positioning. It really isn't that difficult. So we'll start with an SM57. You can have a little flashlight to see where the speaker is in case you can't feel it. Usually you can feel it right here. I mean, we're using a 112 cap, of course. If you're using a 212, it might sound a little bit bigger in general. A 412 is going to sound huge. Is that going to be relevant in your mix? I think I showed you in the beginning. I personally don't think it is. So I can feel wood, and right here's the speaker. So you kind of have an idea where the 112 is. So if you feel the edges, you kind of know that this is the middle. Now, if you're smack in the middle, it's going to be very abrasive, very top-endy, very fizzly, and you don't necessarily want that. If you're on the edge, it's going to be rounder. With the 57, I want to be in the middle, but slightly off. We're going to start in the middle and then go slightly off, and technically, that's where you are. I guess it. I usually never actually check my work and then move it around and have someone in the room and saying, can you move it like, 2 millimeters to the left? I think this is all bullshit. But then again, you go ahead and explode the comment section. So now with this Triad Orbit stand, I have a good way to position it. I'm feeling, and I'm smack in the middle. And I already leveled it. We're using this Revv G50, which of course I could use DI with a built-in Captor X, but we're not, and we're going to do that later. And I have a, crunchy mid-gain sound. Now, without listening back, that's where I would have it. That's the middle, and I'm slightly off. It might be too much, but that's why I have another mic to help out. Now, we're just going to do the condenser. In this case, I'm using the Sennheiser MK8. So we're going to swivel this one away and swivel this one over. I would have this further to the edge, closer to the edge. That's the song. So, and I have a pad in here because it's usually too hot. Padding means you're taking the output level down. So be sure that you have a mic that can do that when you're working with very high loud sources. And here I can now position this beautifully. And let's just by itself see what we get, okay? So this would be kind of the middle, not off center. For this mic, probably too much. So now I'm going to combine them, and this is the part where you just have to pay some attention, but you get the best of both worlds. I'm going to put the 57 slightly off center, and again, I usually don't check, and I get good sounds. And this one now, somewhere outside, but the very important thing is you want to phase align them. So let's go to this camera. That means that the diaphragm should be exactly equidistant from the speaker. Why? Well, because if this is further back, the waveform will be recorded later because sound travels through air at 330 meters a second, which means there is a difference. And that means we have the two waveforms. If they're not doing exactly the same thing, there will be phasing. If they're actually doing the opposite thing, if it's at a distance where the wavelength of your sound actually is one wave's up and one wave is down, we're getting technically nothing. It could completely, in a perfect world, cancel each other out. You don't want these hollow sounds. It's horrible. There are tools to counteract that, but our tool is doing it right at the fucking source. So we'll look at the diaphragm right here. Let's say that it is right here on the SM57. And we know the diaphragm on the condenser is right here in the middle. So we just make sure that they are pretty much equidistant from the speaker. And when you look at the waveform that I'm showing you, well, right about now, you can actually see that that's a recording I have done before of this, and it's absolutely perfectly aligned. If it's not aligned, what you can do is later on go in, zoom in, as I'm showing you right now, and move it so that it is perfectly aligned. But it is not necessary if you just pay some attention. Of course, if you're saying, I want more room sound from my condenser, and you're moving the condenser further over here, this close to the camera, well, yeah, then you will have to phase align because it obviously was further away and you couldn't align them. But let's do this. Here's my 57, pretty much where I want it. Now I have this outside, enough outside, and now I'm going to look from here and make sure that it's pretty much where my diaphragm is on the other mic. And that's going to be very round, but I'm fine with that because I got the bitiness right here. So let's record both at the same time. And in a sec, we're going to go into the software, look at what we have, and get some mixing going. But before we do that, we're going to track the Austrian audio mics and see what they offer us in terms of positioning and sound, because, you know, they're brother and sister, that they should blend rather nicely together. I'm going to have to adjust the sound of the dynamic mic because it's an active dynamic, pumping out quite a bit more volume. Okay, now here we've got the OD5 active dynamic mic and the OC7, both from Austrian Audio. And you can already see, I mean, how beautifully simple this setup is. I actually took down the input gain on both to 0. They're both now running on phantom power, but input gain is at 0, meaning whatever preamp you have is not adding any kind of noise or whatever. That's pretty awesome. And I can easily, if I wanted to, get these off axis, on axis, whatever I want to do. In this setup, of course, with this stand, it's absolutely crazy. And you can see right there that positioning them phase aligned is super easy because they are the same capsule. So let's see where I would put them. This would be center. Swivel it down, tighten. We are now a little bit off center with the dynamic. And that's pretty much where I would want the condenser. So we're good to go to track this. And now we're going to go in and see the results. So here we are in Cubase now. And this is the 57 and this is the MK8. And we can zoom in to see how well I positioned the diaphragms. This is pretty much perfection when it comes to phase alignment. You see there's a mountain here and there's a mountain there. And this is the 0 point. Well, I mean, it's not the perfect 0 point. So if I really, really, really wanted to be anal about it, I could do this. But you can see if I did this, for example, if I had moved the MK8 a little bit back, then it would get the audio later. And where this is a mountain, this is a valley, and they would cancel each other out. So let's listen to what that would sound like if you're phase aligning wrong. And that is a big problem in bad guitar recordings. That sounds like one of those really bad guitar recordings, doesn't it? So we zoom back in and technically just go backwards, do an undo. Here we have a clear point. Undo. And now we can see that's about as good as it gets. There's a dip there. Oh, that's clearly the dip we can align on. And we align the dip. Now the same two mics, I did nothing in terms of EQ. Listen to that. And obviously that already shows you what you can do with two mics. Again, I am not EQing anything. I have one mic for my low end. I got one mic for my bite. And big thanks, by the way. This is a, why is there so much dark hair on this? Asparion DAW controller. These things are awesome. I got 24 channels, but right now I'm using 2. So Asparion, good company. Check them out. So you can see I've got my 2 faders here. Might even pull all the other faders down. And let's check it out. That's my group. I need the group. it's pretty clear which one you're hearing. There's no doubt about it. So what I would be doing is using the dynamic and then as my main sound, because that's what's gonna be in the mix. And then mix in the condenser for bottom. But it's not so much bottom that it's gonna trash your mix. So I would do this. Have this down. It also is going to bring you some mids, which is perfect. You can really perfectly dial it in. If you wanted to, you could pan them a bit, but realistically, these two will be one of your guitars to the left. That'll be one of your rhythm. And then you're doing exactly the same thing again to the right. So panning them isn't really going to happen in a mix because this is one guitar and then there's, let's say here, another one guitar. But let's see what happens if we pan them a bit. Realistically, you're not going to have one rhythm guitar. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So that was the 57 and the MK8. And we're going to go to, really curious now, the Austrian Audios. And look at the phase alignment. I mean, I told you that they're super easy to align. I mean, look at that peak being pretty, I mean, it couldn't be perfecter than this. And that's because you're really dealing with the mic where you can very, very clearly see how they're positioned. So let's listen to the active dynamic. Okay. And now the OC7. Exactly the same result that we got with the other two mics, exactly what we wanted. We want a little bit more fatness. So let's take the OC7 down and slowly mix it in with the OD5. I mean, for me, that's a guitar sound right there. Now, let's do the fun bit and put them right behind each other. Okay, so with the MK8, we have more low end. Is that positioning? Is that the mics? Who in the world knows? Both of them would be absolutely great in a mix. Again, guitar does not need all the low end. And that's mic positioning. I mean, if you want to avoid the hassles of everything we just went through, selecting a mic and stand and positioning and mixing and phase aligning and all that, you can use software. I've never played with it, but Neural has some really good stuff. And there's Laney Ironheart software that I've done, and more stuff from Aurora, the Mr. Hector, the St. James from Blackstar, and oh my God, and Amplitude, and there's so much software out there. And when you look at the interface in software for a cab, if there is such a thing, it is usually exactly what I taught you. So that means what I just showed you is knowledge you should apply in software as well. Don't just fiddle around. Know what happens when you go to the edge. Know what happens when you go away. Picking the mics in software is as relevant as it is in real life. It will sound 99.9% the same, but you still have to have that knowledge. Remember tip number 2? Stick with the same cab. The same thing applies in software. Find the cab that's great for you, and then really don't change it too much or at all. I record everything I do with, honestly, 2 cabs. I've got a Creamback 412 in the aux, and I use that for 98% of what I do. If I want to be a bit heavier, I'll have a V30 in there with a bit more top end and a bit more low end. But it is not a drastic change. And those are literally the 2 things I use. And in the Captor X, when I use that, I have 1 cab. It's the Fortin UK30. Made a setup for it. It's when you switch the 6 presets, it's on every preset, so I can't mess up. Find, even in software, what you like, and then stick with it. Tip number 7. Load boxes are your friend if you cannot go loud. And if you cannot go and mic a cab at home, because realistically with any tube amp, it is going to be loud, which is why in the mic placement video you saw me having earplugs. But you might not be able to do that at home. So a lot of us are now dependent on load boxes. And obviously you all know this one. That's the Captor X from 2 Notes. It is a brilliant product, and I'm waiting on like the pro version that hopefully they're working on. But it's got XLR out, amp in here. It's got a bit of an attenuator, okay? You don't have to have a cab on it. And it's a great solution for live with 6 presets. It has... Does this one have Bluetooth? I think it does. But then, of course, USB for the remote and all that stuff. This is a great tool at $550 or $600. And there are many others. If you're working with this, then the dynIR is where it's at. And we're going to show you this with the built-in dynIR in the G50. So there's a whole bunch of amps now from Revv and Laney and Victory and Badcat as well. There's a whole bunch of companies that are now employing the built-in torpedo, either the standard one or the Captor X in the bigger amps. But of course, there's also IR loading, which you can do with this or in the amps. But IR loading in like the Soldano Astro 20 or the Engel Ironball SE. So you can put IRs in there. And we're going to, of course, do that as well. Load some in here from Forward Audio. Now, these kind of devices are great. When you put an IR in it, the only real difference of the device is how it makes the amp see the cab. And that is the reactive load, meaning what kind of cab response is the amp getting when you're playing, because the cab kind of communicates with the tubes. And for a realistic sound, that reactive load quality is important, which is actually where Red 7 with the Amp Central has a very, very good product. You load IRs just like in any other box. There's a stereo effects loop, all that stuff. But realistically, it's not an attenuator, by the way. It doesn't make things quieter. It turns things off completely. That's it. Or go to the cab and be all the way loud. But that actually is one of the best reactive loads out there because it really feels like a big cab. There's loads of these boxes out there. I mean, the tube amp expander, all the 2 Note stuff, Sandrock, React, IR. I mean, Sur has stuff. I like the aux from Universal Audio. It is not loading IRs. It is not doing dynamic IRs. It is speaker modeling. It's a different idea. And yet again, you still have to know what the different mics do and positioning and all that. As you can see, it is the same idea in terms of the knowledge that you need behind it. And, well, if you have a load box that makes things quieter or lets you work without a cab, then you don't have to spend the $1,500 on the aux. You can actually get the aux Stomp full video on my channel, which gives you everything in stereo that the aux has, including the effects, which is pretty damn good. And you operate this with Bluetooth software on your phone or tablet. This will get you as realistic sounds as a good IR will, but more flexible if you ask me. But these tools are all there. So the only thing between you and a killer recording and the hit song of your life is knowing what is good. The only reason why there's shitty guitar sounds out there is people don't know what a good guitar sound is. And they will end up with not enough mids, too much low end, and so on and so on. The tools nowadays are so damn good that it's really easy to get great sounds. So let's go into some of the dynamic IR stuff, and then also build into the Revv generated G50, do some dynamic IR and actual IR loading. So I'm going to show you the 2-Notes Torpedo software with the Revv G50 that I've got right here with a dual XLR out running into the DAW directly. The cab isn't on. And I'm going to show you what you can do in the software, which is essentially exactly the same things we've talked about, just virtually. And imagine loads of little IRs that you're just like shifting through when you're changing mic position and mics and stuff like this. So it's really the same thing as the real deal, just after the fact, kind of, in a way, but maybe not. So I recorded a little loop with like a mid-gain to high-gainy sound in my book. We're going to see what that sounds like. So here you see the Torpedo software, and you can clearly see there's a mic, which in this case is a ribbon. And here's another mic, which in this case is a dynamic 57. We all know what that is. You got axis and distance. You can also put it behind the cab if you so choose. So the way that this sounds would be this. You can, because we've got the two mics, mute one of them and only listen to the 57. It's exactly what we want from a 57, so we're going to mute that and look at the ribbon. That is giving us, as always, the low end, and of course, together, we have really what we want. We've got the definition from the 57 and the low end from a ribbon or whatever you want. I mean, let's go to a condenser mic here. Let's listen to this. Even too much top end. I don't need that because I have that from the 57. So let's go back to the ribbon and together. So let's go mute the ribbon and show you what axis will do in the software, even though, we've already discussed it in real life. Of course, more room there if we get the distance. You can't really do position here because position is kind of axis, but it's the same idea. You move it further to the edge and you get a rounder tone. And with the rounder tone of the ribbon, you don't even have to move it to the edge. Let's try this. Because all that does is get even rounder. But of course, together, you very, very quickly have the tone you want. And in here, I always suggest, again, pick the right cab, stick with it. If there's a little bit too much of anything or too little of anything, here you have post effects and you can, of course, EQ things. And that low thumb that we talked about, for example, I wouldn't want, so I might actually just tame it a little bit using that EQ. and we're going to talk about top end later. Now, of course, with the 2-note software, you've got cooler things that you can do using the built-in Captor X in the G50, or of course, if you're using a Captor X by itself, you can switch it to stereo and then have a different EQ on the right, or even just a DI signal on the right, which allows you to apply an IR later in the mix if you so choose. You could also apply the twin tracker, and that's going to sound like so. Which is very, very good and very effective for that sound if you want doubled guitars in a live situation. For a studio situation, I would advise against it, because it takes the fun away from doubling it. So I advise actually playing it twice. And there's going to be a separate video on guitar tracking and arranging techniques very soon. So now we're going to go and load an IR in here and see how the Torpedo software inside the Revv handles an IR. So if you think the perfect cap is not hidden in dynamic IRs or dynIRs from 2 notes or in an actual cap, the perfect cap is an IR that you've heard of or you've personally tried. You can, of course, load that into that amp, and you can load that into the Soldano, you can load that into the Laney, you can load that into the D20, you can load that into a lot of amps with built-in IR loading, or the Friedman IRX, etc., etc., etc. Or you could load it into some kind of software. So the IRs we're trying, as I mentioned in the beginning, this video is sponsored by Forward Audio. They have a nice pack of different IRs, and actually what I like is they have somewhere, it's not that mic, that mic, that mic, and you have to go through a million different IRs, because with an IR, it's a mic in a certain position with a certain cap and a certain preamp, and it's that. You can't move it. It is what it is. Which means you're very dependent on that is what it is being very good. So what they did is give you all these individual mics and positions, but also give you some that just really work already. Okay. So if you look at the IR manager, I loaded some that actually really work already in here. The Sweet Child of a Gun, the Food to Fly, the Creed Sacrifice, Scorpions, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know what cap that is. I don't know what mic that is. If I find one that is balanced and good, it'll do the job. However, there are, of course, also, we're going to load one here. Let's go to the Mesa. You can now see there's a big list of IRs in here. This named IR by number. And solid, spark, tube, solid, spark. I mean, I don't know exactly what that is. We're going to go with solid. It's probably a 57. I'm going to drag that over here. Let's go to tube. We're going to drag that over here. And maybe we'll combine 5 and 6 and 7 here. So if I go to the IR loader, let's actually do that. So the first one inside the Torpedo, we're going to go to this one. And we're going to go to these two are now loaded. I'm going to mute the first one. So let's see what that sounds like. Really not bad. What does the second one sound like? Very, very similar. A little bit more low end together. I'm going to be honest, I've never heard these. I usually think, and it's not because I'm sponsoring the video, but usually IRs have not enough mids, too much top end. The frequency response, there's something off to me usually. This sounds pretty good. But of course, you can go to the already pre-made ones. So let's go to the Sweet Child of a Gun. I mean, and the Tool one, that should be very different. So Sweet Child sounds like this. And then the Thule one sounds like this. Very clearly way more top end. Together. I'm that would very, very clearly cut through a mix, and you probably wouldn't need that much top-end boost. And you can, of course, within the software and within any kind of IR software, and they actually have their own Fairmageddon, it is called, where you can load 4 of them at the same time. You can tweak with an EQ. Let's try this. Okay, as I said, I've just tried these for the first time, and they are extremely balanced. I love that. Like, none of them go too far in any direction. It's exactly what we talked about. I'm going to say they nailed that. I'm just going to go to the Sweet Child without any other, just that. That'll do the trick. Again, find the one and stick with it. So they're going to sell you a shit ton in this bundle. Find the one that's for you with your setup and stick with it. That's one I would stick with. We should also try to put that in a modeler and see what happens. Tip number 8, we're staying in the digital realm. Same thing I said about software can be applied to modelers. Now, of course, there's many modelers out there, and I'm sorry, people, you're going to hate me. The more money you spend, the better it gets. And of course, everyone says, yeah, if you get the Ampero, which is great for the money, and you put good IRs in it and you roll the top end off, which I don't agree with, it gets better and more realistic. But honestly, someone saying that, and I think the Amperos are good products, or the Helix is a good product, but anyone saying, yeah, it sounds just like the real thing, I've heard one that sounds like the real thing, and that's this. And this, which is actually a modeler, but you can't load IRs into it. You can't put other amps in it. All it is a Marshall and some cabs, and it's what it is what you get. What you get is what it is. But when it comes to being a Marshall, this is the shit. So if you're doing rock and roll and cleans and blues, this is all you need. So I do think that anyone saying, oh, you know, it sounds just like the real thing and it's amazing, I feel this does, but that's expensive. It's not as expensive as an amp and a cab and cables and interface and all that. But again, maybe you don't know what good tone, sound, frequency response is, because we forget about it. I mean, kids nowadays think that all this auto-tune stuff is how people sing. They think that's singing. It isn't. Once in a while, go back to a tube amp. Play that. Then go to your digital gear and see if it's the same. And I know this might be arrogant, but I do it every day. I've got these amps going into load boxes and stuff like this. I've got cabs. I have the AB every day. When I say something is as good as that, then I have the absolute AB right there. I can literally switch back and forth. If you don't have that, you might forget what you're actually going for. And that is, again, the big thing. What are you going for? So modelers, great, but some of them not as great as others. This, for me, is bang for the buck, the best thing on the market. Not for metal. So let's take this thing, and I have to learn how to put some IRs on it. And we're going to check out the forward audio IRs on this. So now we're in the Quad Cortex, and I have it brand new. I didn't know how it works, so I had to figure out how to download IRs in there, which worked through the cloud, and I had to, Wi-Fi, all that stuff. But that's done now. We're using the same loop, and with a preset that I made right now with a built-in cab. So it's not an IR, it's the 412 California standard, who knows what. And I'm going to show you the same principles we talked about, but how it applies in the Quad Cortex. So that's what it sounds like. So if you look at it, this is the cab, and there's a dynamic 57 on the left. And what do you see? A ribbon 160 on the right. You know, total standard. So we're going to only look at the 57 right now. And there you have position. So further inside, further outside, which means we can go from bright to darker. And then distance for a little bit more of the room, but not too much. So let's play this. Kind of a nice way to do this, and let's listen to the ribbon. So we could actually get really drastic with the mix and put the 57 way inside and the ribbon way outside. Let's see what that sounds like. That gives you a nice and big sound. And these are, of course, in there, but I put the forward audio IRs in there. So let's see what happens. I will replace this with, I don't know, I've never done this. You can see there are single and dual. Let's go with the single. Let's make it simple. So choose IR file, and there they are. We're going to go to the Sweet Child of a Gun that we already had and play that with that amp in the quad Cortex. Done. Let's see what we can do. High pass, low pass, pan, delay. If you needed that for some reason. It automatically sounds good. A little bit top end there, but that's not so bad because you want that anyway. To be honest, I wouldn't do anything to that. I'm happy. Let's switch them around a little bit. I think, for me, in terms of balance, that Sweet Child of a Gun is great. There are some that are leaner, there are some that have more top end, but they're all balanced enough, and none is woof, woof, woof in the low end, and none is super bitey. So I'm thinking that what Forward Audio has done here is not overload you with a billion IRs, and giving you something that gets you to the point relatively quickly to find that one cap that hopefully you heed my advice, you stick with. So going back to the original one that was in the Quad Cortex, it's not that it's bad in any way. It sounds great, but honestly, even me as an IR skeptic, I would probably go with Forward Audio the way that I built it. Even though, I mean, yes, you're going to say, oh, it's a sponsored video by them. I mean, use your ears. If you don't like it, you don't like it. What do I know? But that's how you would use IRs in the Quad Cortex, or of course in any modeler that you would prefer. You can do the same thing in the Helix, their wave files. You can do the same thing in the Ampero stage. You can do the same thing in the Fractal FM, whatever, and the X effects and all that stuff. Obviously, this is not something that is proprietary to the Quad Cortex, but it is what I had here, and I wanted to try out the editor anyway. Now, I was going to go back into Cubase and show you that last tip, tip number 9. Very, very, very important one, but the video's too long anyway, so I'm going to just tell you about it. and then you try as you please. People use this EQ curve. I've seen it. People that have YouTube channels, people that know what they are talking about or should know, and they use this EQ curve for mixing guitars. Now, rolling off the low end is a good idea because we need space for the kick drum and the bass. And I, for years, have rolled off the high end, which is something you might want to do if you have a bad digital sound, because that top end digital fizz is there with lower end modelers and software. So yeah, you're masking the quality. If you have a good sound, you don't have to mask it. How do I know? Well, I, for years, tried to find out how does Chris Lord-Alge mix, and that guy knows how to make a rock mix kick. They asked him, Chris, when do you use your SSL plugin? They pretty much just doubled his SSL console as a plugin. And he said, because he has a real console, why in the world would he use the plugin, right? And they said, well, when my high shelf on the EQ isn't enough for guitars, meaning he's already pushed his EQ 15 dB up at 5K. So everything above 5K, he's pushing like crazy, 15 dB up. If that's not enough, I have my guys apply the plugin in Pro Tools ahead of time, before it hits the console, and push it even more. That should tell you how much top end as a shelf he adds to guitars. He adds ridiculous amounts. And once I started doing that, same thing, by the way, for snare drum. Once I started not doing this, cutting it off on the top, low pass filtering the guitar, all of a sudden, my mixes started to bloom. They started to sound so much better. So giving a shit ton of top end to a guitar, electric guitar, distorted, look, if it worked for Chris, why wouldn't it work for you? Now, I don't use the SSL. I use the Mark EQ4, which has something called an air band. I'm showing you right here. And that air band, I pick 5K and dial it in usually about halfway. That EQ in general is perfect because you can't mess with frequencies. It's not parametric or even semi-parametric. That 3 or 2.5K is perfect for icky bite, but careful, it's in the vocal range. Those mids are amazing for leads and creaminess. The 160 is ideal for body of the guitar, and then I usually take the two low ones all the way down, and only if I need a bit more oomph do I get them up. But the biggest trick is, if Chris Lord-Alge has his plugin before it hits his console, add high shelf at 5K. And then he adds more high shelf at 5K on his console. That tells you everything about adding top-end shelf to your guitars. Now, the comments are going to explode that that's all bullshit, but look, Chris Lord-Alge is not wrong. And once I started doing it, my mixes got so much better. Then I told this to Glenn, and Glenn started doing it. And he said the same thing. So don't do ridiculous surgical EQing. I don't go and like cut out this tiny bit of... If you're doing these super surgical EQs, there's something wrong with your guitar sound to begin with. And then go back to the IR, which if you have the right IR, you don't have to do anything. Or go back to, did I do something miking it wrong? Did I maybe not phase correct? And so on and so on. So those are my way too long tips for guitar recording. If nowadays you cannot get a good guitar sound, positioning is super easy. Buying an IR is easy. Getting the aux stomp is easy. If you don't get a good guitar sound for your recording in any style, it's because you don't know where you want to go. You don't know what sound you need. There are many shitty sounds out there because they're not balanced. But it's up to you to see that there's not enough mids, too much top end, too much low end, not enough low end, and so on. If you don't find the balance, then that's up to you. The gear nowadays can all do it. So that's it from me. Thank you big time to Forward Audio. I thought this video would be a quick and easy one I could do in 2 or 3 hours. It's 3 days now, but that's what happens here on the channel. Thank you so much. I put links below to Forward Audio, who sponsored this video. I think I mentioned that 17 times. Thank you, Daniel. And we're going to put animals at the end.
Taking the day, there's an oddity in my way. I don't seem to care for what I did before. Playing tennis in a thunderstorm, sipping gin till the break of dawn.